What if I told you that everything you believed about life in a simple conical teepee in the middle of an icy desert was not true? We imagine the teepee as a fragile dwelling, exposed to the winds, completely unsuitable for the harsh winters of the Great Plains. But for the indigenous peoples of America, it was not just a home, but a perfectly designed survival machine, capable of withstanding the most violent blizzards. This design was the result of thousands of years of observation and ingenious engineering solutions. Not recorded on paper, but passed down through generations. Every element of the tipi, from the angle of the poles to the way the skins were laid, had a deep meaning and served a single purpose: to preserve warmth and life. Watch this video to the end, and you will learn how a simple hearth in the center and two controllable wings at the top turn the tipi into an impregnable fortress in the midst of raging elements. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of Native American architecture, which will change your perception of survival. We are used to thinking of a dwelling as a static box that passively protects us from the elements. But the indigenous peoples of the plains saw something more in the tipi, a living, breathing organism that actively interacted with its environment. This philosophy was the key to their survival in conditions where modern humans would not last a day. The tipi did not fight the elements, but used their power to its advantage. Its design was dynamic and adaptive, allowing it to respond instantly to changes in wind direction and snowfall intensity. Imagine not a tent, but a system where each element performs its function in perfect harmony. The poles are the skeleton, the skin covering is the skin, and the smoke vents at the top are the lungs that regulate the breathing of the entire house. It was this perception that allowed them to achieve incredible efficiency. Unlike square structures, which bear the full force of the wind, the aerodynamic shape of the tipi allowed air currents to flow smoothly around it. This reduced the pressure on the structure and prevented its destruction even in the strongest hurricane. The conical shape also prevented snow from accumulating on the roof, causing it to slide down. The interior design was no less sophisticated and resembled a circulatory system. A special inner lining created an airflow that circulated from the bottom up. This constant airflow fed oxygen to the fire and removed smoke, creating a comfortable microclimate. Every resident of the tipi knew how to operate this system. Adjusting the smoke vents was a real art, requiring an understanding of the slightest changes in the weather. It was like steering a ship's sail through a storm. The process of setting up a tipi was a ritual full of meaning, where every detail mattered. The location of the entrance, the angle of the support poles, everything obeyed the laws of nature and common sense. There could be no mistakes here because the price of them was too high. Thus, the secret to survival was not the thickness of the walls, but the ingenious system of air and heat flow control. The tipi was not a shelter from the storm, but its partner. It did not resist the wind, but danced with it. This concept of a living house is so different from our ideas about architecture. Modern technologies seek to completely isolate us from nature. Here we see an example of complete fusion with it. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about this approach to building a home compared to modern methods? Write about it in the comments. Want to know the secret that was more important than the tipi structure itself? Before even setting the first pole, indigenous peoples conducted a thorough reconnaissance of the area. Choosing the right location for a winter camp was the first and perhaps most important step for a successful winter. They never set up camp on open plains exposed to all winds. River valleys protected from prevailing winds by high banks or hills were considered ideal locations. This location created a natural barrier that significantly reduced the force of blizzards. In addition to protection from the wind, river valleys provided access to two other vital resources: water and fuel. Even in winter, under a thick layer of ice, the river remained a source of drinking water. It was enough to cut a hole in the ice to provide the camp with water. The forests and groves that grew along the rivers were the main source of firewood for the hearths. Preference was given to hardwoods such as poplar or willow. Their wood burned slowly and gave off a lot of heat, which was critical for keeping the tipi warm. Firewood was prepared in advance before the onset of severe cold weather. Dry fallen trees and branches were collected and stored near the camp. This supply had to last for the entire winter, so that during a blizzard, it would not be necessary to go outside in search of fuel. The orientation of the camp was also taken into account. The entrance to the teepee was traditionally located on the east side. This protected it from the cold northwesterly winds and allowed the first rays of the morning sun to shine into the dwelling. Experienced chiefs could read the landscape, predicting where the largest snowdrifts would form. The camp was set up so that the snowdrifts formed at a distance, creating an additional natural barrier from the wind. They used nature as an ally, not as an enemy. The location of the teepees within the camp was also important. They were not placed randomly, but in a specific order, often forming a circle. This arrangement contributed to the creation of a special microclimate within the camp and strengthened the sense of community. Thus, survival began not with the construction of a house, but with a deep understanding of the environment. Knowledge of winds, terrain, and vegetation was as important a tool as a knife or an axe. Without this knowledge, even the most perfect tipi would be useless. But even in an ideally chosen location, the cold could still penetrate inside. Ready to learn about the secret element of tipi construction that created an invisible thermal shield? In the next chapter, we will reveal the mystery of the inner sky. What I am about to show you is a true gem of Native American engineering. Most people, when looking at a teepee, see only its outer covering. But the most important part of the structure, responsible for retaining heat, was hidden inside. And that was the lining, known to the Lakota as the ozon. It was not just a decoration or an extra layer of skins. The ozon was a canvas made of treated leather that was attached to poles at a height of about 1.5 to 2 meters. It ran around the entire perimeter of the teepee, stopping about 10 to 15 centimeters from the top and the ground. This detail, simple at first glance, created an ingenious air circulation system. Cold air that penetrated under the outer edge of the covering did not immediately rush into the living space. Instead, it entered the gap between the outer covering and the ozon. Moving up this channel, the cold air gradually warmed up from the heat of the hearth, which was radiated through the ozon. Then this already warm air smoothly descended into the living area. The result was a natural convection system that constantly renewed the air but did not create drafts. The ozon also performed a second important function. It acted as a heat reflector. Heat from the central hearth rose upward, reflected off the inner surface of the ozon, and was directed back down toward the people. This allowed the heat from the fire to be used as efficiently as possible. In addition, the ozon served as a barrier to moisture. Any condensation that could form on the inside of the cold outer covering flowed down it. It did not drip on people's heads or wet their clothes, but went into the ground in the gap between the two layers. This inner lining also provided additional insulation. The air gap between the ozon and the outer covering worked on the same principle as modern double glazing. It significantly reduced heat loss, saving precious fuel. On dark winter days, the light-colored inner surface of the ozon, often decorated with patterns, reflected the light from the fire. This made the interior of the teepee brighter and more comfortable. The ozon turned the dwelling into a real home, creating a feeling of security. Without the ozon, the teepee would have been just a conical tent, blown by the winds. It was this detail that turned it into a highly efficient machine for living in extreme conditions. It was the secret ingredient that made the design complete. This technology, based on a deep understanding of the laws of physics, is striking in its simplicity and effectiveness. It proves that complex materials are not always necessary to create comfortable conditions. Sometimes it is enough to organize airflows correctly. What if everything you've been taught about strength is outdated? We are used to associating reliability with massive rectangular shapes. However, the conical shape of the teepee was an ingenious solution that allowed it to withstand the two main enemies of winter: hurricane-force winds and heavy snow. Unlike a vertical wall, which takes the full force of the wind, the sloping walls of the teepee caused the airflow to slide up and around. This significantly reduced the pressure on the structure. The teepee did not fight the wind, but dodged its blows like an experienced fighter. The structure itself was slightly tilted. The rear, windward side was steeper, while the front, where the entrance was located, was more gradual. This gave the teepee additional stability and aerodynamics. turning it into something like an airplane wing standing firmly on the ground. The long wooden poles that made up the frame were not just supports, they were flexible, allowing the entire structure to breathe slightly and move under the pressure of the wind. This elasticity saved the tipi from destruction, where a rigid structure would simply have broken. The poles were very securely attached to the ground. In warm weather, they were simply stuck into the ground. In winter, when the ground froze, their bases were covered with snow and watered, which, when frozen, froze them firmly into the ground. Snow, which poses a threat of collapse for many buildings, was not a threat to the tipi. Thanks to the steep slope of the walls, it did not accumulate on the surface. Snowflakes simply slid down, forming an additional heat-insulating snowdrift at the base. This snowdrift, which formed naturally around the tipi, was another element of protection. It covered the lower edge of the roof, blocking the penetration of cold wind. Nature itself helped to insulate the dwelling. The outer covering of skins also played an important role. The skins were sewn together so that the seams overlapped each other from top to bottom. This created a tile effect, preventing meltwater or rain from penetrating inside. Every detail in this seemingly simple design was the result of centuries of experience. There was nothing superfluous or accidental. The shape, slope, and flexibility all worked together as a single system to achieve maximum stability and protection. Thus, the conical shape was not a tribute to tradition, but the highest degree of engineering pragmatism. It proves that the most effective solution is not always the most complicated one. Often it lies on the surface, suggested by nature itself. In the next chapter, we will look inside and learn how they controlled the heart of the tipi, fire. Ready to learn more? The center of life in a winter tipi was the hearth. It was not just a source of heat, but a sacred place around which the whole family gathered. Proper organization and maintenance of the fire were critical to survival. The hearth was not located strictly in the center, but was slightly offset toward the entrance. This arrangement was due to the design of the smoke hole at the top, which was also offset. This allowed the smoke to escape more efficiently, following the natural air currents. The hearth itself was a small depression in the ground, often lined with stones. The stones accumulated heat from the fire and then slowly released it, even when the flames died down. This created an additional source of heat and saved firewood. Time-tested materials were used for kindling. Dry moss, crushed bark, and other flammable materials served as tinder. Fire was produced by friction or by striking a spark with flint, which required great skill. Pre-prepared dry wood was used as fuel. Wet or rotten wood produced a lot of smoke and little heat, so fuel was chosen very carefully. Wood was never thrown into the fire haphazardly. It was stacked in a special way, creating a structure resembling a pyramid. This arrangement ensured a good flow of air to the base of the flame. This allowed the wood to burn evenly, hotly, and with minimal smoke. Controlling the fire was the responsibility of the women. They made sure that the flame did not go out either during the day or at night. Often, smoldering coals were kept in a special ash pit so that a new fire could be quickly lit in the morning. Safety was paramount. There was always free space around the hearth. Any flammable items, such as fur rugs or clothing, were kept at a safe distance. What if I showed you a time machine that would take us to the heart of an Indian dwelling? At the top of each tipi were two distinctive ears or wings. These were smoke vents. It was this ingenious system that allowed the draft to be controlled and smoke to be effectively removed, making the tipi a comfortable and safe dwelling. Each vent was controlled by a separate long pole that reached down to the ground. These poles allowed the inhabitants of the tipi to adjust the position of the vents without going outside. It was like controlling a complex mechanism that required precision and understanding. The main task of the valves was to create the right draft. They were positioned according to the direction of the wind. On the windward side, the valve was closed, and on the leeward side, it was opened, creating a low-pressure zone that literally sucked the smoke out of the tipi. This system was incredibly flexible. When the wind changed direction, it was enough to go around the tipi and rearrange the poles, turning the entire valve structure around. This took only a few minutes and allowed for instant adaptation to changing weather conditions. In calm weather, both valves could be opened wide, creating a large opening for smoke to escape. During heavy snowfall or rain, on the contrary, they could be almost completely closed together. This protected the hearth from precipitation, leaving only a small gap for smoke to escape. The ability to set the valves correctly was one of the key survival skills. If they were open too wide, precious heat escaped from the tents. If they were closed too tightly, the room filled with acrid smoke, making it unbearable to stay inside. This system also served as ventilation. By adjusting the position of the valves, it was possible to control the flow of fresh air into the dwelling. This ensured that the fire burned and created a healthy atmosphere inside. It can be said that the smoke valves were the lungs of the tipi. They allowed it to breathe, maintaining the perfect balance between warmth, fresh air, and the absence of smoke. Without this system, life in a closed room with an open fire would have been impossible. The simplicity and effectiveness of this mechanism are striking. It did not require any complex parts, just 2 extra skins and 2 poles. But it was this simplicity that ensured its reliability in the harshest conditions. How many modern ventilation systems do you think can boast such simplicity and efficiency? In the next chapter, we will look down and find out how they solved the problem of frozen ground under their feet. Even with a hot hearth and warm walls, the frozen ground could take away a tremendous amount of heat. The problem of floor insulation was no less important than protection from the wind. Indigenous peoples solved this problem with a multi-layered system that turned the frozen ground into a warm and comfortable bed. The first step was to prepare the site for the teepee. Before installation, the snow was carefully removed down to the ground. Sometimes a small depression was dug in the center, where the hearth would be located. After installing the frame and covering, the entire floor inside the teepee was covered with a thick layer of dry grass, branches, or pine needles. This layer created the first air gap, which blocked the cold coming from the ground. It also served as a kind of cushion. Processed skins were laid on top of this plant layer. They served as the main insulating material. They were laid with the fur side down, as the air pockets in the fur provided excellent thermal insulation. In places where people sat and slept, a second layer was laid on top of the main skins. These were softer and warmer fur blankets, which served as bedding. They were laid fur side up for maximum comfort. This multi-layered system worked very effectively. It not only insulated against the cold, but also warded off moisture. Any moisture that penetrated from below was absorbed into the bottom layer of grass and branches, preventing it from reaching the sleeping bags. This simple but effective solution once again demonstrates a deep understanding of the laws of nature. Instead of trying to change the ground, they simply created a comfortable and warm layer above it. They used available materials to solve a vital problem. When a blizzard raged outside and temperatures dropped to extreme levels, one warm teepee was not enough. Special clothing was required to go outside or even just to stay inside the dwelling. The winter wardrobe of the indigenous peoples was another example of ingenious adaptation to harsh conditions. The main principle was layering. Instead of one thick and uncomfortable garment, they wore several thinner layers. This created air pockets between them, which were excellent at retaining body heat. The main material for winter clothing was processed hides and skins. They were durable, warm, and windproof. The craft of tanning hides was perfected, allowing for the creation of soft and elastic materials. A thin suede shirt was worn on the body. Over it, a tunic or dress was worn. In severe cold, an additional vest with fur inside could be worn. The legs were protected by long leggings and moccasins. Winter moccasins were taller than usual and insulated with fur. Dry grass was placed inside as an insole, which absorbed moisture and provided additional warmth. The main element of outerwear was a long cape or robe. It was sewn from the warmest and thickest furs. Such a robe completely covered a person from head to toe, leaving no chance for the cold to penetrate. Special attention was paid to protecting the head, hands, and neck. Fur hats, warm mittens, and scarves were essential elements of winter clothing. Heat loss through the limbs and head was unacceptable. Clothing was not only functional, but also beautiful. It was decorated with embroidery, fringe, and various ornaments. This reflected not only the status of the owner, but also their spiritual connection to the world. All clothing was loose and did not restrict movement. This was important because even in winter, life did not stop. Various tasks had to be performed both inside and outside the tipi. Thus, clothing was not just a covering, but a personal life support system. Each element of it was thought out and tested over centuries. It was as important a tool for survival as shelter or fire. The most reliable fortress is useless if its defenders have no provisions. A prolonged blizzard could trap people in their tipis for many days or even weeks. Survival in such conditions depended entirely on food and fuel reserves made in advance. The main rule was not to leave the dwelling during a severe blizzard. It was possible to lose your bearings in the thick blanket of snow just a few steps from your own tipi. Therefore, everything you needed had to be at hand. The basis of the winter diet consisted of foods that could be stored for a long time. These were dried meat, fish, and various berries and roots collected in the summer and fall. These foods were light, nutritious, and did not require complex storage conditions. One of the key foods was pemmican. It was a mixture of ground-dried meat, fat, and berries. This high-calorie food was a real energy concentrate that could sustain strength for a long time. Food supplies were stored in special bags made of rawhide. They were placed in the back, the coldest part of the tipi. The low temperature served as a natural refrigerator, keeping the food fresh. Water was obtained by melting snow or ice in a pot over the hearth. Clean snow for this purpose was collected near the entrance. It was an endless source of drinking water right on the doorstep. Equally important was the fuel supply. Firewood, harvested in the fall, was stored near the tipi. A small amount, enough for a few days, was always brought inside to keep it dry and easily accessible. When the storm subsided, the men's first task was to replenish the firewood supply. They went to the nearest forest to gather fuel. This was a priority as no one knew when the next blizzard might begin. Such foresight and planning skills were the basis of survival. Indigenous peoples lived in harmony with natural cycles. They knew that you had to take what nature gave you and do it in time. The strategy of stockpiling was perfected. It allowed them to survive the longest and harshest winters without lacking the bare necessities. It was a victory of order and planning over the chaos of the elements. Ultimately, the main secret to the survival of indigenous peoples was not only the technical perfection of their dwellings, it was their social structure and the strength of their community. No one survived alone, they survived together. The long winter days and nights when blizzards prevented them from going outside were not a time of despondency. On the contrary, it was a time to strengthen social ties. Families gathered together around the hearth, which became the center of their universe. It was a time for stories and legends. The elders passed on the wisdom of their ancestors to the young. Stories about the creation of the world, the exploits of heroes, and the laws of nature. In this way, the knowledge necessary for survival was presented in an engaging form and passed down from generation to generation. Women did needlework. They mended clothes, embroidered moccasins, and wove baskets. This monotonous but important work not only provided the family with everything they needed, but also had a calming effect, creating an atmosphere of comfort and stability. Men took care of their weapons and tools. They made new arrowheads, repaired harnesses, and prepared for future expeditions. This time of forced inactivity was used to maximum advantage. Inside the tipi, there was an atmosphere of mutual aid and support. If one family ran out of firewood or food, their neighbors always shared their supplies. The understanding that everyone's survival depended on the well-being of all was at the core of their worldview. Living together in a confined space taught them patience and respect for one another. There were strict rules of etiquette that governed life inside the tipi. Everyone knew their place and their role. It was this sense of camaraderie, unity, and common purpose that helped them survive the darkest times. People supported each other not only materially but also morally. A kind joke or a timely story was valued no less than an armful of firewood. Thus, the physical warmth of the hearth was inseparable from the emotional warmth of human relationships. Survival techniques were important, but without strong social bonds, they would have been useless. They survived because they were not just a collection of individuals, but a united people. This social resilience was their last and main line of defense against the merciless elements. They opposed the cold and wind not only with skins and fire, but also with the strength of their spirit. And in this battle, they emerged victorious. We can see that the tipi was not just a primitive hut, but a complex and perfectly balanced system for survival. Every element, from its aerodynamic shape to its ingenious ventilation system, was the result of centuries of observation and a deep understanding of the laws of nature. It was architecture born not on a drawing board, but in the heart of the harsh elements. The choice of camp location, layered clothing, strategic supplies, and most importantly, the strength of the community were all part of a unified strategy for life. The indigenous peoples of the Great Plains did not simply wait out the winter, they lived in it, in complete harmony with its harsh laws. Their experience is an invaluable lesson that the main tools for survival have always been and remain the human mind and the ability to cooperate. What other aspects of the life and culture of the indigenous peoples of America would you like to see in future videos? Suggest your topics in the comments and we will definitely consider them. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new exciting stories.